Hi and welcome to Green Cross Global Discusses. My name is Ross and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Learning and Development Manager here at Green Cross Global. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ellice Whyte, our lead business psychologist, and we're going to be talking about the impacts of the modern working world on our wellbeing. Ellice, a real pleasure to see you today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Ellice. So we hear the terminology of well-being associated with mental health quite a lot. They're linked together. But actually, well-being means so much more than that. So in your opinion, what does well-being actually mean?
So well-being has a number of different aspects towards it. You can have mental health as one of the parts, but there are different things that you can have with regards to your well-being. Spiritual well-being, financial well-being, physical well-being, social well-being even. So there are lots of different aspects to well-being. And what well-being really means is the quality of your life, the quality of your life and the meaningful aspects within what you feel in your spiritual well-being, financial well-being, and how that impacts you.
So we'll come back and discuss some of those different strands that are associated with well-being. But how has the modern world changed the landscape when it comes to working?
Where do we start? Actually, it's changed quite a lot since the COVID pandemic. Of course, we've had to completely readjust our ways of working. It depends on what organisation though. Some of them have had to still be at work, business as usual, and nothing has changed. For example, healthcare. But then there's lots of different office-based changes, or some people might be agile working, remote working, as a result of the COVID pandemic. So there's lots of different benefits and also some caveats to all of these changes. The other thing is the digital changes as well, where we now live in such a connected culture. It's so much easier to work internationally. And so we've got a kind of always on, digitally driven culture within our workplace that is another key change over the past few years.
So obviously we're all unique and we're all different, and so we'll be impacted by different things. But as a business psychologist going into businesses, what common impacts are you seeing in this modern way of working?
So there are some positive impacts. There are people that absolutely love working from home. Some people say that they get more done because there's less distraction. Some people say that they find that it's actually been very beneficial for their well-being because they've not got the morning commutes, they've got more time to be at home with their families, more time for exercise, able to eat healthily, save more money. So there are some benefits to being able to work digitally and be working from home. But then there are some other impacts that might be more detrimental. For some, it's a bit more of a lonely lifestyle where you're less likely to connect face-to-face with people. So actually it's impacting their social well-being. Then you've got some people who actually they might need that mentorship or that education and development, which sometimes you don't necessarily get online. For example, if you're starting a new job, then you might learn from being in the environment around you and observing. Whereas when you're at home online, you might not necessarily get the same opportunities that you do in the workplace.
So now we're moving kind of post the lockdowns. Are you seeing people that have been impacted by the demands and the work pressures that have been there through COVID?
Absolutely. There's a few things that I'm noticing more and more. Firstly is presenteeism, where people might be feeling unwell for physical reasons or mental health reasons. And because it's so easy to work from home, they're still present in the workplace in some shape or form. However, they're not necessarily well enough and performing their best. They're not at that kind of optimum way of working. And it's easier to not take the time off and just say, I'll work from home. And sometimes it can be beneficial for you to take that time away and have a break. So I'm seeing more people use the working from home as an opportunity to rest, but they're not truly resting, if that makes sense. You've also got this always on culture. You know, we've got our emails on our phones, we've got the workplace now encroaching in our family space and our home space. So people are finding it more and more difficult to switch off. So they might find that they're answering emails at different points of the day where it's actually outside of their working hours, meaning that we're actually working longer than we ever have before. So finding it difficult to switch off and relax and actually working longer is another thing that I notice a lot more of as well.
So I did see written down somewhere that this constant on equates to, with emails, it's something like the whole works of Shakespeare, which he wrote quite a lot, is being emailed 72,000 times every minute. So, this constant on, I can see that. Is it sustainable?
Not without support. Not without support. We can't go on with this always on culture and expecting us to be able to thrive in that environment without rest, reflection, breaks, support. And that's one of the worrying things at the moment, is that okay, we've got the availability to be able to work digitally online, but actually we need to make sure that we take what we need first. We need breaks, we need rest, we need reflection, we need socialising, we need lots of different things, and without them, we're not going to work at our best.
So there's lots of also talk about burnout. I know the World Health Organization is talking quite openly about burnout, and I can see it from this constant on. If you look at those email demands that are always there, are you okay to talk just a little bit more about what is burnout?
So burnout is where you've experienced prolonged stress, okay, and you're completely exhausted by it. Imagine emotions like a tunnel. You have to go through the tunnel to get to the light at the end. And then at that point, you'll feel that sense of relief and safety. Whereas with stress, if you don't kind of move through it and get to that light at the end and you stay stuck in that tunnel, that's when people experience things like burnout, the emotional burnout, the physical burnout, the workplace burnout, where you might find that you can't focus, you can't concentrate, you've got that kind of brain fog. You might find that you lose your kind of interest and motivation in things. Sometimes you might even feel like, I don't care about this anymore. And that's one of the common things we see in the workplace, where people are finding it difficult, making mistakes, not wanting to communicate or get involved as much as they did. They might find that they're making mistakes in the work that they do, not engaging in meetings, and maybe even forgetfulness as well. So that's a little bit about what burnout is, and how we need to support that is by addressing the stress, addressing the things that are causing that burnout, and allowing us to take a break.
So quite interesting, you mentioned there about stress, and there is lots of talk about stress and about the potential that stress can be a good thing, stress can be a motivator. And I know we share kind of the same opinion of the terminology around stress and about reframing that.
Yeah. Pressure can be good for us. Pressure can be motivating and give us that kick that we need to get on and do things. But actually, stress is the adverse reaction to something that we perceive as threat or danger. So we get all of those hormones and emotions, or that fight or flight response we're often aware of, and we can't go on living in that fight or flight response. If we have long-term stress, then we're more at risk of developing type 2 diabetes, mental health conditions, coronary artery diseases, strokes even. So no, stress is not good for us. Pressure can be, okay? Some of us need that pressure, but it's been well researched that people perform worse under stress. And actually, we need to have a healthier environment to allow us to thrive, and it shouldn't be a stressful one.
So we've talked about stress and we've talked about burnout. In the workplace, in businesses, how can this actually be monitored then?
First and foremost, talk to your employees. You know, they're the ones going through the day-to-day lifestyle of that workplace. So talk to your employees, see how they feel. You could do this by having conversations with them in kind of meetings, focus groups almost. You can do employee engagement surveys, which are really popular, easy to collaborate with and get as many responses as possible. I'd also want to understand how the people are feeling when they have taken time off sick, or even if they are leaving the business. Those are primary opportunities to be able to address what is happening and what can we improve. So that's one way you can monitor, by asking the people that are actually experiencing it, and monitoring things like sickness absences, turnover, exit reports, complaints as well, and looking at the data and finding out from the horse's mouth, as you say.
So we can see actually that they're a little bit interlinked, aren't we? You talked about mistakes happening because under stress, and mistakes can happen when we're experiencing burnout. And those, you know, to come forward and start to talk about those can be hard, because earlier you talked about, when we talked about well-being, you talked about financial well-being. You know, and if you come forward in a business and say, actually, you know, I've made these mistakes, there's the fear potentially of retribution, isn't there? Of which could then impact you financially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a thing we need to address in the workplace by developing psychological safety. That's all about being able to come forward and speak your truth, or be your whoever you are and your identity, without fear of negative consequences. So we should try and facilitate a culture where it's okay to come forward and speak your mind, speak the truth. Let us know if you've got financial concerns, and we will do what we can to be able to best support you.
So they say that Rome wasn't built in a day. We're talking about changing culture, changing a way of working, changing thought processes. How do we go about that?
Psychological safety. Culture is definitely something that takes time to address. First and foremost, we need to find out what the culture is like. So there needs to be an element of investigations, research, and finding out what the current landscape looks like in terms of employee wellbeing or culture. And then from that, we can develop some interventions that will truly address some of the causes of concerns. The most common things that we tend to do are things like awareness, education, and training. Sometimes we can do interventions to try and do team building exercises and collaboration exercises, particularly important if you work digitally and online, because we need to make sure that there's that social well-being within the community as well. So I would say that your research is the most important thing. Finding out what is the culture like, what do people think about it, what are some of the causes of concerns or conflicts that have happened, and then how can we change it? What do they want to change it? And also train people, educate people, give them the opportunities for development, and make sure that everything is working in best practice. So developing your policies and making sure everything is easily accessible and understandable.
That sounds excellent. And I know there is great reports from Deloitte about return of investment over everyone in the organisation, individuals, certain groups. So are we talking kind of a blend of all of that?
Yes, I would say that, training, education and training is one of the best things you can do. Personal development is one of the reasons why people stay in an organisation, not necessarily due to pay. but actually opportunity is one of the best things that we can do to facilitate a positive culture and to to reduce turnover, to boost morale. So absolutely invest in your staff. And then it also pays to praise. So feedback and development of your staff in terms of this is what you're doing well, these are things that we want to help support you in improving, then those are the other things that I would say are two of the most highest return of investments that you could facilitate in a company quite easily.
Okay, so we've discussed a little bit about well-being regarding work. What's your thoughts about, we discussed earlier, physical well-being. So what's your thoughts about how we can improve or maintain a good, positive physical well-being?
So one of the changes, as I was saying about the digital world, is that we live in a very sedentary lifestyle now. We don't necessarily have to walk more than 5 steps to the computer to be able to start work in the morning, or we might be commuting in a car or train, which means that actually we don't have that much movement built into our days. So we need to start to improve somehow adding more movement into that time. Maybe walking to the station or taking a break and going for a walk during lunch, but making sure that we don't just sit sedentary at a workplace, at our office all day. Then we can also think about, what other types of movement we can get in. So stretching, yoga, those are the sorts of things that can be beneficial, especially because we're seeing more musculoskeletal problems as a result of sitting at a desk all day. Making sure that we do stretch out our muscles and take micro breaks so that we're able to stand up, walk around. A huge shift has happened with those sit to stand desks, which are really great as well, so that you can still, stand up and continue with your work if it's appropriate. I've even seen treadmills and kind of step things developed to sit under your desk as well. So there are ways that you can add movement into your day-to-day life without necessarily taking you away from your desk. But I would still encourage you that those breaks are really helpful for your brain as well as your body.
So quite interesting, same again, that things are linked together and you're talking about getting that movement more in the workplace. And there is, I think I've read that actually those brisk walks can help with stress. Is that true?
Absolutely, yeah. So the stress hormone, cortisol, you can actually find that studies that show a 10-minute brisk walk can reduce your stress hormones by half. Okay, so it doesn't take much, but we do have to have that period of exercise or walks that can actually improve our physical and mental well-being.
So that's interesting, about walking. And also there's good research about, you talked about mindfulness, yoga, meditation, that can reduce stress as well. How about sleep? Because sleep is something that we kind of, we should do, and we take it a lot of the time for granted. How important is sleep?
Sleep is one of the core components of our well-being, of every single part of our well-being, really. Without sleep, we can't function. It's a time where our body rests and repairs itself from the day before. It's really important for memory, for our physical health and our immune systems. It regulates our mood. It does so much. I could almost do a whole webinar on sleep and well-being.
So that's great. I just want to focus a little bit. You talk about social well-being. We're now in a digital age where some people are working from home, and we seem to have lost that conversation over the coffee machine, checking who's got the best lunch, or the conversation on the bus or on the tube or car sharing. What can we do to maintain or improve our social well-being?
Some of the digital platforms that we're using for work have amazing, facilities within them that can actually support that social wellbeing. You know, some platforms have little huddles, or you can have online meetings, you can make little groups. So it'd be good to use those as best as you can, but also book it in. So I've seen companies say that they'll always have an hour every week just for a catch up, and it's not work related. That is your tea break that you can take and have a get together with your teams just to catch up and see how everyone's getting on. I was involved in a meeting the other day where actually they requested everyone send in things like pictures of their pets, and you know, it was lovely to see people connecting over something that isn't work related, and yet that was all facilitated online, and people were, you know, so much more positive as a result of that meeting. People had smiles on their faces and were enjoying that culture, which I haven't necessarily seen be done face to face. So, you know, there are pros to having the digital world sometimes as well, but we've got to make sure we make time for it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You know, us as an organisation, we have a weekly all hands up where the whole of the company get together, and we talk about anything and everything, from jam recipes to favourite cat photos to your favourite album, everything except work. And it's really important to generate that conversation, you know, that recreating that over the water butt or the coffee machine conversation. But quite interesting. Then we have these, you know, this coming together, you know, which is really, really important. How do we stop, you know, with people working from home, and in some business, people being in the work, how do we stop this kind of them and us culture that can appear in some organisations?
Yeah, we want to do collaborative work as much as possible, and sometimes that does involve setting aside time where everyone comes together and getting the people that work from home to come in. And most of the time they are happy to do so, as long as it's scheduled and that they have opportunities to, you know, ensure that they've got their childcare or pet care all sorted. So being able to still have those community moments where you can bring everyone in should still happen. And if you can't do it face to face, you can still do it online as well. So trying to facilitate as much togetherness as possible. And making use of the time or the facilities that you have, like with your digital platforms.
So yeah, it is really important that you know, people working from home, from the workplace, that actually we bond this and everyone comes together so we can move forward together as an organisation. And a lot of this is based on communication, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Communication is key. Without it, no part of the business will function.
So to finish with, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, Ellice. And with your experience going in working with organisations, I'm going to ask you your top 3 points that you can pass on to business leaders when we start to talk about culture change when it comes to well-being within an organisation.
I would say research. You know what you're going into. Know what the current landscape is. Don't just guess. Don't just ask a few people. Try and gather as much data and information as possible. The second thing I would say is make sure that your data gathering and all of the research is done in the most robust way. So if you're not sure, ask a professional, ask somebody like myself to be able to come in and say, this is what we need to look for, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we'll manage the data. And then communicate it. Communication to all staff is so key, so that everybody knows what they're doing, what's expected of them, and allow collaboration at that point as well, so that not only do we ask them about what it's like, but also about what they want, and then we'll communicate that as a whole community to be able to thrive and work in our most effective and optimal way.
So really, it's kind of, you know, get your ideas, get your plan, get your information, your data, okay, and get communication going, get everybody on board to move this change of culture to promote well-being.
Exactly, yeah. Your business is only as good as your employees, someone said once, right? So we've got to make sure that we understand from the ground up what's the community culture like, what's happening, and what do we need.
Okay, so it is all about having a plan, the direction, how long we want to take to get there. It's about data, it's about communication, because communicating will get everybody on board. Ellice, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk about everything to do about the modern world and how it impacts on our well-being, and actually to focus on the different strands of well-being. It isn't just about mental health. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Always enjoyed.
And thank you for everybody for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with Green Cross Global Discusses. I shall see you again soon.